I want to just pick it up in terms of central banks once again. We talked about the Fed. I think your view is that the Fed will, in fact, get it right. They don't want to surprise the markets. But let's talk a little bit about the Bank of Canada, because the inflation numbers that were just recently out were probably a little bit more shocking to most people, higher than expected, the highest numbers we've seen in 10 years. Do you think that the BOC is going to be forced to taper or raise rates sooner than the United States and sooner than they perhaps have been indicating?
Yeah, I actually do think that the Bank of Canada will move faster. And the reason I say that is, as you mentioned, the inflation numbers were hot. The job picture is actually better in Canada than the United States. We've got more jobs recreated after the pandemic than what the US has. And I think generally the Canadian economy has actually held up relatively well. So I do think that the market is anticipating that the Bank of Canada will go faster than the Fed. How much faster, I don't know quite yet. But I don't think the Bank of Canada wants to go too far ahead of the Fed either. So I do think that we're going to continue to see some upside in maybe the Canadian dollar as a result of that. But after the tapering, has started in the United States.
Okay. Well, interestingly as well, though, the Canadian dollar actually did decline when we heard of the election being called. Now, at the same time, to be fair, WTI was also declining. But I want to get your take in terms of how you've been viewing the federal policies over the past number of years, what you think investors, viewers need to be considering as they go to vote.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because we've had a pandemic, right? So all the stuff that's gone on in the past year, you kind of throw out the door. But what I would say is that Canadians are quite happy at the moment with the Liberal government. And you can see that by the recent poll numbers. And they wouldn't have called an election if they didn't think they were going to get more votes coming through as well. But if you think through, we've seen the equity markets do really well. We've seen jobs come back faster here than the United States. Though we were criticized for the vaccine now rollout has been much better than most parts of the world. So that's given optimism to a lot of Canadians. And also that if the variant does start to continue to grow, our chances of a lockdown are a lot lower now than they would be compared to the United States, given how much vaccine rollout has already occurred, how many people have had double vaccines. So when you think about the election, whether it be a majority or a minority, to me, I don't think it really is going to matter too much. I think the market will just embrace the fact that the Trudeau government will continue to be in power, happy with that. And because the pandemic is still not over, they want to see consistency there. So I just see that continuing on. And again, as I mentioned, I do think the Canadian dollar will appreciate because that generally means that the policies in place are going to continue on. And when we talked about the interest rates, that will probably continue on. People will continue to expect that to go ahead of the Fed.
But when you think about some of the policies that have been put in place, I mean, one could easily argue that if we had more business-friendly policies, that we'd be much further ahead. I mean, you just take a look at the energy sector, still producing 4 million barrels a day, which is what we were when Trudeau came into power. And really, we gave that energy file to dissident nations. That's money that could be in the coffers of Canada.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the energy sector, I think there's a lot to be learned there for sure. And I think that's probably one of the areas that you could criticize the Liberal government for. But at the same time, think about where oil prices are at today. We're not sitting at $30 a barrel, right? We're sitting at much higher levels. So the energy companies at the moment are still quite happy with what they're seeing. And they are investing back in growth as well. So, at a time when you want to be wrong on the energy policies, this is probably the time because oil prices are at a better spot than they would have been. But there's no doubt if we didn't have this recovery we're happening in the markets today and the economy at the moment, that this would be much forefront in the policy news and what the Liberal government would be criticized a bit more for.
And when you talk about jobs, perhaps better here than in the United States, I mean, it's apples and oranges essentially. But what kind of quality jobs, and are they high-paying jobs? I think that's what people have to also be cognizant of.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a mixed picture here. I do think that we're still getting pretty decent jobs being created. If you go back, 10 years ago, the jobs that were created in Canada were all in the energy sectors we were just talking about. Those were high quality, high paying jobs. Today, they're probably not to the same extent, but we are seeing jobs being created in the AI world, artificial intelligence, and that's also high paying jobs as well. So we're seeing a bit of transformation here. I wouldn't say it's comparable one-to-one there from energy to AI because more energy jobs were created back in a decade ago. But I do think that we're moving in the right direction. And in the US, I think what's happening is there is a search for talent as well. and also the fact that you have a lot of individuals who just haven't wanted to go back to work right now, either because of the subsidies that they're getting, or also because schools haven't started and they're still have to worry about their kids and schooling. I do
Okay.
think a lot will start changing in September.